third target is trying to maneuver. The vehicle is left in a wooded area. It's burned by a drone strike. And here the Russians ran out of fuel. They were forced to leave the armored vehicles to be torn apart by the drones. Ukrainian drones are happy to carry out this mission. A few strikes are enough to burn an APC and a tank to the ground. The AFU is appreciative of the gift.
But Ukrainian forces also occasionally fall into mine traps. The Ukrainian armored personnel carrier arrived to pick up soldiers from the front lines for rotation. However, when it was returning and crossing the road, it got hit by a mine. There might have been multiple mines there, judging by the intensity of the explosion.
If you subscribe, may God give you $1 million.
In these video footage, the Russians were launching a counterattack but ended up losing all their tanks to the mine barrier set up by Ukrainian soldiers. The front line is so saturated with mines that neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians can advance quickly. The Russians have mined vast areas, dug numerous trenches, and filled them with personnel.
Another example. An FPV drone hits a Russian tank on a combat mission. And again, we see how, from a massive explosion, the tank turret soars to an incredible height, possibly more than 50 meters. That's the height of a 16-story building. Keep in mind that the turret of any Russian tank, along with the gun, weighs approximately 2 tons. As it falls, the tank turret can produce an additional explosion if ammunition is stuck inside. But usually, the turret falling from a 50-meter height can literally get stuck in the ground. Whether it falls down with the gun or the other way around, the turret can get stuck even in asphalt like it's butter. Can you imagine if such a turret fell on someone's house? Interestingly, when a tank explodes with full ammunition load, the explosion can be so powerful that barely anything remains of the tank. From the very beginning of the war in Ukraine, we have witnessed more exploded Russian tanks than in the previous 80 years. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of video evidence, but there are plenty of photo confirmations. Ukrainian roads were scattered with parts of Russian tanks and their turrets. For a long time, no one cleared them, and people curiously examined these tank remnants, taking pictures against their backdrop. Perhaps at the start of the war, the Russians themselves didn't suspect that their tanks would explode so easily. Russians are well aware of this, so at the first sign of smoke, tank crews swiftly abandon their tanks and flee as far as possible. Tankers who, despite everything, continue to attack while inside the tank truly deserve medals for courage. Death is so ingrained in the DNA of Russian tanks that even from above, the detached turret of a Russian tank oddly resembles an alien skull. Western tanks like Leopard, Challenger, or Abrams may not be perfect and also have vulnerabilities, but at least they guarantee the lives of their crews. The likelihood that the crew remains unharmed after being hit by an anti-tank missile is very close to 100%. I want to emphasize once again that throughout Ukraine's use of Western tanks, we have not seen detached Leopard or Abrams turrets. Ukrainian soldiers note that Western tanks indeed preserve their lives. The autoloader in the Russian tank is a convenient invention, but any crew would prefer the hard work of manual loading over evaporating into the sky with a detached tank turret. Tanks T-72 and T-80 were specifically designed to combat Western tanks. Soviet engineers had to create a tank that was cheap, fast, and maneuverable, but the safety of the crew was not a priority at all. In Western tanks, the ammunition is housed in a special armored capsule separate from the crew. This capsule has a special blowout panel with an opening. When a projectile hits the ammunition and detonates, the entire energy and pressure from the explosion escape through this panel upwards, while the crew is protected by a special armor. After the ammunition detonates, the crew remains unharmed and can easily exit the tank. Designers were happy, crews were happy, and nobody got turned into an involuntary astronaut. In Russian tanks, the ammunition is located in a special autoloading mechanism beneath the crew. In fact, the crew sits on it like a powder keg. When the ammunition detonates, a powerful explosion of all projectiles occurs simultaneously, creating enormous pressure that forces all the energy of the explosion upward into the space of the turret where the crew is located. If the autoloading mechanism in Russian tanks is fully loaded, The pressure is so strong that it detaches the tank turret and lifts it dozens of meters into the air.
Late night. A drone with a thermal imager observes several more targets. They are being hunted. The Ukrainian points the javelin at the target. A massive detonation. Take a look at this without thermal imaging. Second APC gets closer. It shoots at ghost targets and receives a gift from the AFU.
Recently, the Ukrainians tracked down a large ammunition depot and abandoned buildings on the outskirts of the city of Donetsk. During the night, a precise missile strike was carried out on this depot using HIMARS. The ammunition immediately started detonating and scattering in all directions, but after just a few seconds, a massive explosion occurred, illuminating the entire city. One of the local residents managed to capture that moment on video. But that's not the biggest explosion in the city. The largest explosion during this war occurred in the Ukrainian city of Khmelnytsky. The Russians hit warehouses where outdated ammunition was stored. When the ammunition exploded, many thought that the Russians had used tactical nuclear weapons because it resembled a so-called nuclear mushroom cloud. Fortunately, the city didn't suffer much damage as the warehouses were located on the premises of a disposal plant.
But it's a lot easier when the drone can fly right in, like this time. Notice how exquisitely it's done. For a moment, you might think nothing's going to happen, but no. An explosion of unbelievable power.
The Russians are afraid to concentrate a large number of ammunition in one place to avoid the Ukrainians destroying them. Therefore, they disperse the majority of their ammunition. Some of them are hidden in small batches in forest plantations. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance constantly searches for and destroys such depots. Part of the ammunition is constantly on wheels. They are transported directly from rear depots to the front. Aerial reconnaissance also helps in destroying trucks carrying ammunition. Thus, step by step, the Ukrainians are clearing their land from enemy forces.
Spotted a Russian tank and 2 APCs. Ukrainian drones fly out to meet them. First strike. The occupiers are at a loss. Hid in the fuel compartment of the tank. Armored vehicles are left to burn.